A lot of the songs on this album, sound-wise, remind me of George Harrison, which I think is down to a couple of things. If I'm having real trouble with something, what I find is that if I throw something in that's unusual, like playing on a slide, for example, it just gives me new ideas. You can't go back to the old routines if you're not playing in the style that permits those routines. So I find it easier to compose purer melody with a slide than playing regular guitar, for the most part. I think that's true. So partly the title track is named for George and to say thank you, really, for the inspiration. But also partly because I think it was thematically significant to his work in that the song has firstly, it's a very pretty sounding song, which is by design. Thematically, the lyrics are supposed to be meaningful, but they're mixed very low down and with a lot of reverb, and if you know what they are, you can sort of barely make them out, but you can't really. It's quite difficult, and that's the whole point. In life, things on the surface are stereotypically beautiful, but you can miss the bigger picture because you can't see past them. Empty Hands is me trying to write a chorus. I'm really bad at choruses. I find it really hard to... I like writing lyrics a lot, and I don't like repeating myself. If I don't have enough to say that I don't have to repeat myself, then I feel like there's not enough in the song. It's not saying enough. So I find it tough to try and find a phrase that doesn't lose its weight when you repeat it. So this is really an experiment in me trying to see if I can do that okay. And it's alright, I like it. It's a pretty early song. This album is, I don't know, some of the demos of this album are older than my first release, so, 7 years old or something like that. This is one of those ones. But, so it's been nice coming back to some of them and making them up again. In particular, I liked coming back and I changed the bass part in this song a little bit, and it's one of my favourite bass parts that I've ever written. Actually, there's a couple on this album that I really like, but this one in particular. So the bass is mixed a little bit higher in this, and there's a bass solo even in the middle bit, although you may miss that. It's mixed quite low. Flowers is the title track of the album. There's a guitar part in it that's a bit of a leitmotif that comes up in a couple of the other songs. It's, I think, the only song I know the only song I've ever written that has a harpsichord in it, so that's interesting, I suppose. I've got an SG Junior that I used on a lot of the tracks on the album, and that's playing the solo in this. It's about 3 or 4 tracks of that guitar doing that guitar solo, all layered on top of each other. Things Are Looking Up is one of the oldest songs. It might actually even be the first song that I ever wrote. I had to change some of the lyrics at the very end of the song for the album because it was a bit of a mouthful, however I'd written it before, but I didn't change anything else. It's one of those songs where people will hear it, I think, and assume that it represents what I really think about life, which isn't true. It straddles a pessimistic line that I don't really subscribe to. It's a character song, and it's a fairly dour and self-contradictory one at that. It All Comes Around is another really old one. I left the lyrics again as they were, so they're very sort of, I think, lower sixth is the right expression. But they work, and it's a good excuse for some pretty interesting slide guitar. I like the melody in the slide solo in this one. Another song is one of my favourite songs that I've ever written. I really, really like it. It's fairly individual sounding, which I like, and it's totally not like... I was trying to write a song that sounded like Oasis, which it absolutely does not. So it really... And it was a song that came within an hour, all of the parts written, recorded, finished within about an hour. My grandfather hates the song because the third chord is weirdly dissonant to him. He can't stand the sound of it, makes him uncomfortable. So take from that what you will. The riff to Trust is definitely me trying to sound like Pete Townsend, fingers dancing around the chords instead of playing. Pete never plays straight chords, he's always doing suspended notes and things like that, and so this is definitely me trying to do that. So there's a lot of acoustic guitar in it, a lot of strumming like Pete does. I had a lot of trouble writing the solo for this because, not the melody, I had the melody, but I could never find an instrument to play the solo that sounded right. And I ended up doing, I think it's doubled electric 12s, that was probably also a Pete Townsend thing, or a Tom Petty thing. But it sounded muddy, still sounded muddy, and so I ended up, while I was finishing up the mixing and mastering of the album, I ended up trading a Gretsch for an acoustic, and I doubled the solo with that, and it just happened to work, so that's how it is. Out of everything I've written, I think Press Flowers is the song that I've heard the most that people like, and I think it's partly because it's very simple lyrically, but it speaks to deeper things. There's obviously the message of don't forget to stop and smell the roses, but it's also saying if you aren't aware of the past, if you don't look at the things that you've done right and wrong, then you can't move forward. That's what it's about. And the metaphor for pressed flowers I thought worked really well, because the whole point in pressing flowers is to keep something beautiful for yourself, but really what it ends up being is that you put a flower in a book and keep it in an attic. It's good to take out your memories and dust them off once in a while and remember where you came from. Since You Gave Up on Me is a duet, two people having the same thoughts about each other and not talking to each other. So the first verse is sung by one of them, the second verse is sung by the other, so my voice is panned differently for those two, and then the two separate pans come back together for the middle bit and the third verse, so they say and think the same things about each other. Now you may say, it would be easy to notice this if somebody else had sung one of the two parts, and to that I would say, oh, yes, it would. All for Nothing is about, I suppose, it's partly about being afraid of death. It's partly about worrying about whether you're doing enough to be fulfilled in life, and it's partly about how unfortunate it is that at some point you don't get to see the fruits of what you achieved in your life. Or maybe you could look at it more optimistically than that and say that it's a reminder that you should do more, or you should do everything that you can. Platitude starts with, when bequeathed the gift of faith, the child will spend it all in one place. So roll the dice, we'll find someone to test out your convictions. That's about taking the risk to understand people who don't agree with you instead of towing the line in an insular group. So it's about avoiding echo chambers. The second verse is about how if everyone goes for the low-hanging fruit, then nobody's really saying anything. And specifically, if comedians don't push the envelope, who will? So to tie the album together, it's a cautionary tale at the end. If you tell the truth as you see it, you will offend some people unless you aren't saying anything important, and that's a necessary part of progressing the cultural dialogue. People need to be critiqued to see where they might be wrong, and you have to be open to that as well. So as people speak their true beliefs, you get to see the best and worst of humanity, and that's actually necessary to challenge ideas and see which ones don't stand up. So when you get to your old age, how can you look your younger self in the eye if you didn't say the things that you really believed? And then there's a cool guitar solo on my gold top Les Paul.